What's going on, folks? Just wanted to record a quick video to share with you some of the things that I observed in reading and responding to your resumes. Overall, I thought you folks did a really nice job, and so I just wanted to highlight some of the things that I found myself saying fairly frequently to folks about how to improve their resumes. The first thing that I found myself saying quite a bit was you really have to think carefully about the order in which you present information. So you really have to kind of think about what is the most important, relevant credential that I have, and that is the thing that you should probably try to put front and center on the resume. I found that some people for whom their education was probably their most relevant and important credential were burying that at the bottom of the page. Remember, you're here earning a degree for a reason, because that degree is your entry point into your new line of work. So it's very important to consider the order in which you present your information. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I found myself saying basically on everybody's resume is that you really need to focus on how you're formatting various types of information. And so I have an example here pulled up, and this is from the Purdue Owl, and this is their example of a chronological resume, which simply means that things are listed in reverse chronological order, so the most recent is first. And I just want to point out that a couple of things. One is that you'll notice that the previous employer is in bold, and that's by design because that allows that piece of information to stand out. And you'll notice that they're not taking up a tremendous amount of space with that information. They've really limited it to 2 lines and then a description of what that position entailed. And you'll also notice that the description of the position and the duties and the responsibilities are bullet pointed, which I think is a very important thing to do. We do not want to be writing in paragraph form, especially when you consider that the average reader is only going to spend about 45 seconds on that first read. So we want to put the information in the most user-friendly way that we can. The other thing that I want to point out is that you'll see here that they are leading their bullet points with verbs, and that's super duper important. It's important for a number of reasons. One, it prevents you from writing in full sentence format with a subject, I did this, I did that, and it really gets to the meat and potatoes of the bullet point, which is what you did. The other thing, too, is that if you use really good verbs, they can demonstrate a wide array of things. So if you think about the meaning that's baked into a verb, that can be super helpful to the reader. So we know that if you trained people, that entails a certain set of skills that go beyond just the training. If you collaborate with people, if you design things, all of those words are very valuable to a reader. So I want you to pay attention to how you're describing previous work experiences, and I want you to start with bullet points and verbs, because that's going to help you be, first of all, very concise, meaning you're going to use fewer words, and 2, it's really going to help the reader imagine what you've been doing or what you've done. The final thing, or the second to last thing that I found myself saying, basically to everybody again, was that you have to focus on transferability. You really have to show how your previous work experience, as irrelevant as it may seem, is relevant to the position that you're going into. So you really have to decontextualize it in some ways, and you have to make it relevant to your new work experience. So an example of that would be, I had a student a few semesters ago who worked at Kohl's. And she was in customer service, and she worked primarily in footwear. And so we were working on a resume, and she was an aspiring medical assistant. And I asked her, I said, okay, so how would you describe your position at Kohl's in bullet point form? And she said, well, I stack shoes. And she was, right, that would be a verb. Stacking is a verb. But the likelihood that you're going to have to stack shoes as a medical assistant is pretty low. So we want to decontextualize it and not focus on sort of the mundane things you do in a given position, and instead we want to focus on things that are transferable. So I said, okay, well, let's zoom out a little bit. When you're stacking shoes, what are you fundamentally doing? And after some back and forth, we really landed on the fact that at that point you are maintaining a safe and attractive and efficient merchandising floor or sales floor. And to me, that is significantly more transferable to medical assisting than simply stacking shoes. So what I would ask you to do, and what I would encourage you to do to maximize the effectiveness of your resume, is to really think about, what am I trying to communicate about this previous position? And for most of you, those things are very important, and really you're underselling them. So many of you have had a safety component in previous work. So you've been tasked with keeping people safe or keeping yourself safe or maintaining a safe work environment. So you've got to highlight that. Many of you have experience in customer service, so you've been helping customers and clients and consumers make decisions or solving their problems. You've got to point that out. Many of you have had some role in quality control, so making sure that what you're doing meets some standards. So whether you're in construction or landscaping or whatever it is, manufacturing, you have to make sure that the product that you're putting out or the service that you're providing meets a certain level of quality, and that's an important thing basically regardless of where you are or what you're doing. So it's super important that you spend some time on those bullet points, and that's really going to be a differentiating factor in terms of your grade and your performance on this assignment. You have to sit down and ask yourself, what types of training, what types of skills, what types of knowledge, what types of proficiencies did I gain in that position that will help me in my next position. The final thing I'll say, and this is a very minor point, is that despite what the Purdue Owl is displaying here, objective statements are really sort of old-fashioned. They're fairly unnecessary, and I find that they're generally redundant with things, territory we're going to cover in the cover letter. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. A quick Google search and you'll find that this is a widely published opinion in places like Forbes and Career Builder and other places. It just sort of takes up space or real estate on the resume that we can use to more productive ends. And that's a careful consideration that I want you to make. Is about how you're using the space on the resume. So I've only read a few career objectives in my life that were really worthwhile, that really gave me a positive or useful impression or added value to my experience as the reader. So just keep that in mind. What can be helpful is a professional summary or a summary of qualifications, but those have to be super specific. They can't be very general and abstract. They have to really explain who you are, what you've done, and what you're good at. And it can't be general things. It has to be very specific things. And for those of you who included that, I gave you some guidance on what those ought to look like. Because at the end of the day, every letter, every word on the resume should provide additional value to the reader's experience. So that's what I'm seeing with your resumes right now, and that's the type of feedback that I've given for most people. You can find my feedback by clicking on the drop box in which you submitted that assignment, and what you should see is in the browser itself, you should see your resume, and you'll probably see some little yellow comments, like little post-it notes off to the side that include targeted feedback, so it'll tell you where in the text I'm referring, and then over on the right, underneath your grade, which if you submitted this, you got a 100, you should see it's maybe a more general piece of feedback, depending, some type of holistic feedback, things generally speaking that you should work on. So that's where we're at with the resume, and so I hope at this point you are spending some quality time familiarizing yourself with what a cover letter is, how to write a good one, and what really differentiates an average cover letter from a great cover letter. So I look forward to reading your reflections on the revised cover letter, and I hope that you're finding the materials that I've posted helpful. I'll follow up here in a couple of days with probably another brief video lecture, but thanks a lot.